DataHereToThere.com.
Hi, I'm Steph and this is Jay. We're here on behalf of Data Here to There. And I know you're all super busy with getting your online stores going, or maybe you already have some and it's Christmas and hopefully the orders are flowing in for you. But we're getting a lot of questions from those of you who are interested in automating your data. So we thought we'd do a little FAQ for you here today. So let's start really basic. What is e-commerce automation anyhow, Jay?
Yes, that's a very good question. So e-commerce automation, to me at least, is connecting the entire supply chain. So connecting drop shippers to web stores, so Magento and WooCommerce and PrestaShop and marketplaces like Amazon and Walmart. We want to connect that data to the stores so they can sell products, but we also want to expose the products in new markets. We want to automate entire marketplaces. It's connecting the whole supply chain.
Okay. Well, what are some really typical questions that you get? Because I know we have some customers who are really just starting out, and then we have other customers who have entire marketplaces already automated and running pretty smoothly. So can you give us an idea of the scope of questions you get?
Yeah, so really common one is actually more of a comment. It's like, I've got to upload these CSV files all the time. And I guess they're just wondering, well, can I make it easier? Can you take the pain away, please? Another one is really common about how to disconnect a dropshipper to a store. There's a lot of really good dropshipping companies that are appearing, and a lot of good web stores. And how do you just make one talk to the other? So that's a very common question that we get. Another one is with regard to data quality and how to use plugins. So using a plugin to connect a dropship supplier to a store, but it's maybe got something quirky about the data. So maybe there's missing images or there's other problems with it. So how do I get this plugin to work? So that's another common question.
Okay, well, I think those are great questions, and I definitely hear them a lot too. But as a former corporate librarian, one thing that I think lots of people are running into these days, especially people trying to do business on the internet, is there's some good information out there, but there's a lot of it, and it can be real hard to sort out the good from the not so good information. We have a big TMI problem, I'd say. So let's break this down to one question at a time. Let's start with the question about CSI files. Is that what you call them?
CSV files. So yeah, that's a comma separated values file. It's a common dropshipper data format, so they'll place these on their FTP site. There's also REST APIs. There's also web services, JSON, etc.
XML, lots of different formats.
XML too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, and so sometimes.
So what can you do to automate the downloading of those files?
Oh yeah, well, in terms of automating it, like we can just grab the files from FTP automatically. That's a super simple one. Sometimes they have a very specific API, like a programming interface. So you typically have to hire a developer to go and write a bunch of code and then connect to that service and then download the product data. And so when I'm saying product data, I just mean like titles and descriptions and images and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so how often does this happen, and how can customers be sure that their data is being refreshed frequently enough to satisfy their customers, make sure that everything stays synced up?
Well, sometimes it's sufficient just to update once a day. A lot of suppliers just have a daily update. So during the day, there's activity, there's stores that are selling their products, and they relay orders back to the supplier. And naturally, as a consequence, they have to adjust their inventory. They're selling things, which is good. So what we can do is then update your store to reflect what that current inventory level is. And so that might be every day, might be more often, especially around Christmas, other busy seasons. There's just more activity going on and more sales. So it's better to actually update inventory more often. And so we're very flexible. We can accommodate a lot of different schedules.
Okay, sounds good. So next, we wanted to talk a bit about drop shipping and suppliers. What are some typical questions you get about drop shipping and suppliers? Like, how do stores connect up to those, and how do we make that happen seamlessly?
Basically, the common thing I get is that this is a pain in the ass, and the reason why is because those files I was talking about earlier, the CSV files, they have to go to the supplier's FTP site. They go in, they grab the file, copy it down, and then import it into their store. So maybe they're using Shopify, let's say. There's a special place where you can go on the web and you can import the file. Now, first of all, if you want to do it right, you have to do it frequently because you want to make sure that your inventory is correct. So you've got to be sitting there at the computer and uploading this manually. So we get a lot of people who are like, oh, I just don't want to do that manually. And some people might say, okay, well, why don't I just use a cron job or some other type of mechanism? But it's not always that simple because, first of all, that file might not just have all the data you need, right? Maybe you need to adjust the prices. It's not very common just to take prices right from the warehouse and use those in your store because you've got your own pricing strategy that you want to implement. Maybe you want to add a store margin or other things. So now your work process is grab the data from that FTP site, go into Excel, and run a bunch of macros on it and change it all, and then you go and you import it. And so it's just really time intensive to do that. And so people ask us, how do I automate it?
Okay, well, it's good to know. Let's tackle the data feed question. You get a data feed from a supplier, but there's data missing, or there are other problems with that data?
Yeah, I know, that's really crazy. If it is so common, you'd think if a supplier wants to sell products, they would do everything in their power to make that product look good.
Well,
You know,
why wouldn't they? Like, I
Yeah.
can't understand why the quality of the data right from the supplier would be bad.
Well, it's not always their fault. Like it's for the same technical reason why people want to connect these files to their store. It's difficult. Technology is difficult, and so when they're creating the data feeds, they're not necessarily thinking about who's using the file or how they're going to use it. There's some really basic stuff that should be in there, like product images, that really should be part of, like, would you go to a store and look at a bunch of empty boxes and say, oh, I like that box? You don't know what it looks like. So having product images is so critical. Also names and titles that are useful, like, so you can actually understand what it is that the product does. Like, just think of the best possible online shopping experience you can think of, and then imagine that's the way I want my supply data.
Absolutely, makes sense. It's good to know that it's possible to automate the cleanup of data, like data cleanup on aisle 5.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think some people have this idea that you can go out there and there's all these plugins that promise to do all these things. Isn't there a plugin that you can use to clean up your data, for instance?
There is, but where they fall apart though is in getting the tough stuff, right? So if a plugin has been written by a developer, they're thinking the lowest common denominator. It's like, I need the title, I need description, and it's going to be right here, and everything's going to be great. But it isn't always like that. There is no industry standard for e-commerce data feeds today. There isn't. So what do you do? So the plugin developers have got little mapping sections, so you can say, well, I'll take name from the dropship supply data and map it to title in Shopify, or those types of mappings. But the problem is that it's not always like that, and especially when you get into variants. Variants can be very complex, and when I'm saying variant, I mean like t-shirt sizes. So I have a t-shirt that can be small, medium, or large, and there's a lot of different ways to represent that in a data feed. And the best ones I've seen, they just have completely separate files. And so okay, these are all the files that deal with variants. But other times they try and bake it right into the titles, right? So what do you do with that? And what we do with Data Here There is we take a thoughtful look at the data feed. So we'll say, okay, well, what structure is there, and we'll adapt it in. So that's an advantage where we have, you know, with our consulting process, where we actually look at the data, look at the strengths, and we can fill in the gaps too. So if there's missing images, we can actually hook in our Google image search capability. So what I was mentioning there earlier about an image being missing from a data feed, we can actually find them for you and put them in, so that you don't have that problem where someone goes to your store and you get, you know, the big bunch of mystery blobs to pick from. You actually get something that you can see.
Okay, awesome. I think that's probably enough for one day, but absolutely we want to hear any other questions you have, any comments on this video. We just love to hear from you. So have a fabulous Christmas. I hope you sell a kajillion products, and we'll catch you next time.